Eleanor Hartwell was 8 years old, and she had learned long ago that silence was her world. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Born profoundly deaf, she navigated a universe that hummed and buzzed and rang for everyone else, but for her, offered only a gentle, endless quiet. Her father, William Hartwell, was the kind of man whose face appeared on magazine covers and whose name trended on financial news channels. He had built 3 companies from nothing, commanded boardrooms, and negotiated deals that made headlines across continents. But there was one thing William could never negotiate, never fix with money or power or strategy: the loneliness that visited his daughter every single day. He watched her from across rooms, his heart splitting quietly, as she sat apart from the world that did not know how to reach her. Eleanor never complained. She was not a child who cried about it. She simply sat at lunch tables, in parks, at birthday parties. She was invited to out of courtesy, with a small, patient dignity that broke her father's heart more than any tears ever could. When the Hartwell family moved to Maplewood, a quiet suburb with tree-lined streets and a school known for its inclusion programs, William hoped quietly that things might change. He did not allow himself to hope too loudly. Life had already taught him that hope, when held too tightly, had sharp edges. Eleanor's first week at Maplewood Elementary passed the way all her weeks passed. She found her corner of the cafeteria, unpacked her lunch with careful hands, and ate alone, watching the world around her the way a person watches a film in a language they do not speak, present, but separated by an invisible wall of glass. She did not know that 3 boys had been watching her too. The Calloway triplets, James, Marcus, and Noah, were 9 years old, loud, always in motion, and, according to their mother Dana, 3 separate people sharing one volume setting. They were the kind of boys who filled rooms, but they were also, beneath all that noise, deeply good. Their grandmother was deaf. She had lost her hearing in her 60s, and the entire Calloway family had learned American Sign Language together so that she would never feel alone in their presence. The triplets had grown up signing at the dinner table, signing across the backyard, signing jokes and secrets and apologies and I love yous. Sign language was not a skill to them. It was simply part of how they spoke. On that first Thursday, James noticed Eleanor sitting alone. He nudged Marcus. Marcus nudged Noah. No words were exchanged between them. They were triplets, and sometimes they communicated in that wordless way that baffled everyone around them. Then all 3 of them picked up their lunch trays and walked across the cafeteria. Eleanor looked up when the trays appeared on her table. 3 boys stood there looking at her with open, uncomplicated faces. Before she could offer the polite, guarded smile she had practiced for exactly these moments, the ones that said, "It's okay, I don't mind being alone," James lifted his hands and signed, slowly and clearly, "Hi, can we sit with you?" Eleanor stared. She had not expected this. In 8 years of navigating a hearing world, very few people had ever spoken to her first in her language. Her eyes went wide, and for a moment she could not move. Then she signed back, her hands trembling just slightly. "You know sign language." Marcus grinned and signed, "Our grandma is deaf. We learned so she would never feel left out." Noah added, signing a little faster, "Also, James is really bad at it still, so please be patient with him." James shoved Noah, and Eleanor, for the first time in longer than she could remember, laughed. Not a polite, quiet laugh. A real one, the kind that comes from somewhere deep. The 4 of them sat together that day, and the day after, and the day after that. The triplets made Eleanor part of their world effortlessly, folding her into their jokes and their arguments and their endless, ridiculous debates about superheroes and pizza toppings. They signed to her constantly, sometimes getting words wrong and making her laugh, sometimes asking her to teach them new signs, always making sure she was never left behind in a conversation. Word reached William Hartwell through Eleanor herself. She signed to him at dinner one evening, her face more animated than he had seen it in years, telling him about 3 boys who talked with their hands, He listened, and he did not trust himself to speak for a moment when she was done. He blinked several times and excused himself to get a glass of water. He stood at the kitchen sink for a long time, very quietly falling apart in the best possible way. He reached out to Dana Calloway, and the two families met for dinner that weekend. What struck William immediately was how naturally the Calloway home flowed. Conversation, moving between voice and sign without pause or self-consciousness. The triplets translating effortlessly, including Eleanor, as though it had always been this way. Dana watched William watching her boys and said simply, "They learned because love made it obvious." William nodded. He hired a full-time sign language tutor the following week, not just for himself, but for his entire staff, his household, anyone who was part of Eleanor's life. He was not a man accustomed to being humbled, but he was humbled now. He had billions of dollars and had still not thought to do what 3 9-year-old boys had done instinctively, simply learn her language. The two families grew close in the way that feels less like a meeting and more like a recognition. Eleanor became a regular presence at the Calloway house, and the triplets became a fixture at the Hartwell home, loud and warm and entirely unfazed by its size or its silence. At Eleanor's 9th birthday party, surrounded by people who signed to her and laughed with her and made sure she never once sat alone, she looked across the room at her father. She caught his eye and signed to him, just 2 words, "Thank you." He signed back slowly, imperfectly, getting one hand shape slightly wrong the way he always did. "I love you." She corrected his hand shape. Then she smiled and went back to her friends. Sometimes the smallest hands speak the loudest language. And sometimes children see what adults miss, a heart crying quietly for connection, waiting patiently to be found. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that kindness is the most powerful language of all, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to smile today, and subscribe to our channel, Kindness, True Stories, where every story is a reminder that humanity, at its best, is still very, very beautiful. Your love and support helps us keep sharing stories that matter. Thank you for being part of this family,